Okay, you might have seen in your feeds that alpine skier Michaela Schifrin earned her 100th World Cup win. It's such an impressive win, especially for a skier. Now, what you may not know is that she continues to work through some PTSD and anxiety as a result of a crash earlier in the season. And we all can learn to be champions of our goals and emotions. So we're glad to have author and transformation coach Marni Battista joining us via Zoom. Marni, thank you so much for being here this morning. We appreciate you.
So happy to be here.
Amazing. Well, first off, Marni, you, of course, live here in Colorado. Your story also involves your journey back from injury. I looked at Michaela's video this morning. My goodness, that was a crazy crash and something that we can all kind of resonate with. And it definitely kind of put a pit in my stomach when I watched that. So for you, too, having that injury and having that journey back, can you share more about that journey for you?
Yeah, so I'm living in Steamboat Springs. I never would have imagined when I had that ski accident in 2020, literally days before people started hoarding toilet paper, that fall, I took the double black diamond, followed my friend, could have taken another path. It really shook me to my core. And it was a metaphor for how I was living my life. But I realized that trauma just doesn't live in our bodies. It really rewires how we see ourselves and the world. And so even after my body healed, my brain was still stuck in fear mode. I was like living with an invisible safety brake on. Afraid to really fully engage in my life again, and that was the point that led me into being more of who I am in my life.
That's so huge, Marni. I think too, so often we think of a trauma like this as a big fall or a big crash or something huge that happens. But so often too, I'm sure it can be something smaller that can really lead you to kind of having that handbrake, like you said. So generally speaking, what happens to our brains when we experience that trauma, and what signs should we look out for when it comes to moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It can be a career setback, getting fired, a divorce, getting rejected when you're dating, any kind of thing, right? So what happens is the amygdala, which is the fear center of our brain, kind of goes into overdrive, and it makes us hyper aware, hyper vigilant of threats, even when there aren't any. And so at the same time, the part of our brain responsible for logic and decision making, the prefrontal cortex, gets suppressed, which is why we struggle to move forward or make confident choices. So if you feel like you're stuck in patterns that don't serve you anymore, if you have things that you want to do, but you feel like afraid of taking action, and you can't quite access motivation, confidence, any of those things, what you need to do is rewire your brain, which you can do, to feel safe again.
Okay, I love this. Let's talk about those techniques that we can use to rewire and help kind of confront some of the fear and develop that confidence, because there's some neuroscience behind this, right?
Yeah. So one of the most powerful techniques I teach in my book, Your Radical Living Challenge, is something that I call soul mapping. Okay. And it's about rewiring the hidden stories that we tell ourselves from our past experiences, because those stories are shaping our reality. So let's say someone grew up hearing like, playing it safe is the really smart thing to do. And that belief might have protected them at some point, but now it's keeping them stuck in a job they hate or in a life that feels too small. So the way to shift that is to actively rewire the brain by identifying these stories, starting to question them, and replace them with new, more empowering, truthful statements.
I really like this. I remember kind of growing up and hearing the old adage, don't cry, or girls don't worry about crying, stuff like that. That was a big one for me growing up. Like, oh, no, don't cry. And then now I'm like, why am I not crying on normal things that people cry about? So I really like this kind of rewiring and reframing. Now, your book, Radical Not Reckless Living, is a really great one that we can really dive into when it comes to stuff like this. What else can we learn in the book, Marni?
Yeah, this book is for anyone who feels like they've been waiting for someday to overcome those fears, to start living the life that they really want. And in the book, I give you 7 powerful questions that will help you break free from societal expectations, rediscover your true passion, rewire your brain to be more authentic and courageous so that you can make the bold moves in your life without the fear of having to be reckless or losing everything that you've built.
I really like this. Can you give us an example, Marni, of one of those questions that we can kind of introspectively start thinking about before we get to book?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions is, were you radically honest with yourself?
Ooh.
And that's a really important one because sometimes our fear is telling us to go away
Mm.
from the dream that we have. And when you start to really look at, is this really true? And you're honest with yourself about that fear, then you really like cracked open a possibility where you can actually do that work and overcome it.
Marni, you're turning the mirror on us. I like this. This is so great. This is such a great way to get over some of those fears. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I can't wait to look at the book because there are so many things that I'm like, ooh, I got to rewire that. So thank you again for taking the time, and we're looking forward to living more radically.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Well, Radical, Not Reckless Living by Marni Battista is available now wherever books are sold, guys, and you can learn more about Marni at marnibattista.com.